I've invited the Leader of the Opposition, the Honourable Philip J. Pierre, to join me today to discuss the Hiwanora International Airport project. Mr. Pierre has agreed on very short notice, and we're very pleased to have him here at our studios at Sasusi. Mr. Pierre, thank you very much for joining me today to discuss the HIA reconstruction project. And my apologies because of my voice. I was a little bit over-exuberant yesterday at the St. Mary's College sports meet, cheering on my house, Tapo, the yellow house, and unfortunately we came in last. What house were you in, Mr. Pierre?
Tapo.
Oh, okay.
And when I was there, we never came last.
Well, you're lucky on that part.
Well, Curly, let me thank you for having me, and let me congratulate you on your new show. And I understand I'm your first guest.
Your first in-studio guest, yes.
Thanks very much. I feel honored, and I hope we have a very good show and some good conversation.
Definitely. So, Mr. Pierre, what would you say to individuals who say that you served in a government for 4.5 years and that government was never able to deliver the Hiwanora International Airport project?
Okay. First of all, I want to make it clear that the St. Lucia Labour Party is in favor of the redevelopment of the Hiwanora Airport. I want to make that very clear. We agree that the airport ought to be expanded. We agree that we need some work to be done on the airport. I want to make that clear, very clear. What we do not agree with is the approach that the government is taking towards the construction of the airport. And our reason for saying that is very, very simple. History shows that governments do not or are not very successful in the development of airports in terms of construction. History shows that. History also shows that most governments are moving away from borrowing money to build airports, and they are going into what is called a PPP, which is an arrangement with the private sector firm. And that arrangement does not cause the government to incur any debt. And Kari, I wanted to speak briefly about that debt situation. Because when we speak about debt, many people seem to believe that because the debt may not be paid by you in your lifetime, or because you do not see the effect on the debt basically on your pocket, except in taxes, which some people say taxes are used for other things. Many people do not understand what debt does to a country. If you look at recent history, you will see that all the islands of the Caribbean, the reason why they've had to have intervention by the IMF is because of debt. Basically because of debt. Some people say it's waste. Some people say it's because there was too much spending on social things. I don't think so. I think it's debt. Most of these countries, debt is the cause of the issues. Barbados recently, and I hate to do that, but these things are facts. Barbados was possibly what was described as probably one of the best managed economies in the world. If you look at the figures for that country, you will see in terms of its index of education, of health, Barbados is right up. But Barbados now is in a situation where thousands of civil servants have to be sent home because of debt. Grenada, Jamaica, St. Kitts, now Trinidad and Tobago. All these countries, the issue has been high debt. What the governments have realized is that it is better if you avoid debt, if you try to avoid debt. And one of the ways in which they found to avoid debt is by taking the debt burden away of airport construction from their backs and put it on the backs of the private sector with the expertise, the private sector with the knowledge, the private sector with the experience of airports. And that is what we did when we were in government. And to ensure that it went properly, we did not do it on our own. We looked for the World Bank. And you know the World Bank is an institution that has no political lines. The World Bank works with governments. It doesn't work with political parties. And I want to say that there's a big difference between governments and political parties. The World Bank works with governments. So right now, the government now has will be getting a loan for about $20 million from the World Bank. And it's not the Labour Party or the UWP. The government is getting the loan. So I want to make that clear. So the government that I was part of, and incidentally, airports fall under the portfolio of the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Infrastructure, and is the only board that determines who the board members ought to be. And that's how airports are considered important. It's the only board that determines who the board members are supposed to be. The PS of Finance is a chairperson, and the PS of Infrastructure or Communication Works is a deputy chairperson. What we decided, listen, we had a failed attempt to build the airport, and many people do not understand that. When they tell you, "Oh, you all did not build it," the United Workers Party, attempted to build it too. They attempted to redevelop the airport, and I want to put that in the discussion. The United Workers Party attempted to build the airport, and you know what happened there. You know the issues that happened there. And at that point, there was the ADP. The Airport Development Tax was in play when the United Workers Party tried to redevelop the airport, and they failed.
One of the arguments that you hear quite often is that had the St. Lucia Labour Party government, when it came in 2011, had it kept the ADP, the Airport Development Tax or charge, that it would have then been able to have had money at hand to put towards the airport by now. But they argue quite often that it was removed.
Okay.
What's your point on that?
Well, that doesn't make any sense, any financial sense, because the airport development tax was in play when the bank refused the finance. I mean, it's simple. If it was just a matter of collecting the tax and getting the money, why would the bank refuse? And that's a fact. The bank refused, and not a local bank, an international bank refused to finance the project because of the situation in terms of the procurement, in terms of the process. So the point I'm making to you is that spending $500 million, which this government wants to borrow, is not only a matter of collecting the airport a development tax. If that was so simple, why would every country would just put a tax and build an airport? I mean, if it is so simple, which as people want to say, oh, you're collecting the money. Further, the Barbados government has just gone this way. The Jamaica government has just gone this way. The Bahamas government has gone this way. The British government, in fact, the British government have actually sold the airport to a private sector firm. All the airports been built in Brazil, in Mexico. All these airports are going through the PPP arrangement because governments do not want to get the burden of constructing airports and managing airports, and most of all, maintenance of airports. That's one of the biggest hurdles on the backs of governments, maintenance of airports.
What you hear very often is that the country would be losing a vital asset.
No.
Is that
no? The country is not leaving. The airport will stay. What is happening is a concessionary agreement for 40 years. The airport remains the property of the people of the country. The people of the country have the use of the airport. The government continues to control security, immigration. The government continues to have regulatory control over the airport. But the burden of the debt and the burden of the maintenance and these burdens will not fall on the government for good reason. Because I'll tell you something. What does the government of St. Lucia know that the government of Trinidad did not know? What does the St. Lucia government know that the government of Ghana does not know? Ghana is trying to expand the airport. It's years, it's cost overruns, etc. So what you do is that you allow experts working with SLASPA, and I want to give the assurance to the employees at SLASPA that their jobs were never in jeopardy. The jobs of the people of SLASPA were never in jeopardy, because what would happen is that the airport would be run by a board comprising the private sector partner, SLASPA, and the government of St. Lucia. And further, the port operations would remain with SLASPA. VG Airport would have remained with SLASPA. So the idea that the jobs of people in SLASPA were in jeopardy, that never came into play. Let me tell you what would not be in jeopardy. What would not be in jeopardy is that the country's debt to GDP ratio would not be increased by $500 million. What would not be in jeopardy is that the risk of having to depend on the airport departure tax, which can vary. There is no fixed rate of the airport departure tax. If there's a hurricane, if the drop, and I want to very quickly tell you about the drop in tourism numbers. The stayover visitors for 2018 was only 2.2%.
You mean the increase?
The increase.
Yeah,
It's only 2.2%. And the idea that the tax is being paid by foreigners is not true, because just under 400,000 visitors came to St. Lucia were stayover visitors. And so that means that the other people who came to Hiwanora were St. Lucians. So the tax is being paid by locals and St. Lucians. So the idea that that's a tax paid by foreigners is also not true. It's a tax paid by all St. Lucians when they travel out of the CARICOM countries. So if you're a speculator, you pay it. If you go to holiday in the States, you pay it. You go to holiday in England, you pay it. So there are many things that have been said that are not true.
So what was the tax before?
That there was no airport departure tax before. There was no ADP.
Okay, but there was a tax on
that
travel.
Went up by $10, I think. Yeah.
So they were originally.
It went up by, I have the figures I can show you. It went up by, there was an increase of $10 on the departure tax, and then a new tax was put, which is airport departure tax.
Okay,
which
because
is
from what I think now, right now,
tax.
it's almost $100 US
in total, both taxes, yeah. And then you do not pay the airport development tax if you go in for CARICOM countries.
Okay.
So that you don't pay the CARICOM countries. Yeah.
The argument that the Prime Minister makes quite often is that right now he's charging an airport development tax of $35 US. But then he says that under the concession agreement, the airport facility tax or facility charge would have been $60.
The Prime Minister the Prime Minister continues to say that, but I would like to see. What I wanted to tell you is that the point that we must take to our minds is that the tax does not mean that the airport is going to be well run. The tax does not mean that. Look at the procurement issues. These are broader issues. If it is so simple as I'm saying to you, everybody would just impose a tax and build an airport. Look at the procurement issues. We are dealing. First of all, what is the cost of the airport? What will the airport cost? You borrow $100 million on your national debt at 3.5%, $100 million US dollars, 270 million EC dollars at 3.5% at a variable rate of interest, which means that fluctuates. You borrow that, and then you increase your national debt by that, $270 million. In the same breath, when you open the airport, when you only have the sword turning, you see that it's going to increase. The job is going to cost $75 million plus
175 million.
Right,
yeah.
Right, 75 million plus. So that means you're talking about $175 million, which is nearly $500 million EC dollars. Saying that now, you have not said anything about maintenance of the airport. We don't know about that. What are the procurement processes? How did you choose the contractor? How are you going to choose the subcontractor? How are you going to manage the construction of the airport? Have you got planning approval for it? We are in the dark. The question is, are we sure that the contractor chosen is going to be the least expensive contractor for the project? These are open questions. And to make it worse, what is the performance criteria you're going to get from that contractor? In the PPP agreement, there was a performance bond that was set in, where the contractor had to deal with his own cost overruns if he had any, where he had to follow a certain time frame. If he didn't, the bond would come in. Do you have a bond as far as that is concerned? Further, do you have was the contractor properly chosen? That's very important. How you so the idea that because you're going to collect a tax, you're going to build an airport, it has not been proved to be correct. Further, Jamaica and Barbados, they have almost double the number of visitors coming through their airports, and they choose the PPP arrangement. And finally, when we tried to go this way in constructing our airport, the United Workers' Party failed. They did not succeed in starting the airport. And you know the problems. The Prime Minister promised to have a committee to investigate the allegations that there were 100-something phone calls between the St. Lucia and the airport, the proposed airport contractor, whilst the bid was going on, where the cabinet determined for SLASPA who should be the contractor. All these issues have not been cleared. And to make it worse, the bank refused the government the loan with the tax.
How far along were we in terms of the PPP?
In terms of the PPP, we would have had a financial closing in May 2017. Because what was important there is the procurement processes. It was done, and I insist on the procurement processes because of the magnitude of money involved. It's $500 million you're speaking about. In our arrangement, it was $108 million for the terminal and $90 million of maintenance. Because maintenance of airports are a very important aspect in the development and the growth and the running of airports.
In the current scheme, you're saying that because we're talking about a terminal of 175 million.
That's what.
And you're saying that in your scheme, it was 108 million
and $90 million for maintenance of the airport. $208 million was the total cost of the investment. Mm-hmm. And it's the procurement I want to talk about. There was an international procurement process which wasn't handled by St. Lucians. It wasn't even handled by our tenders board. It was handled international procurement. And
who was managing that?
It is handled by an international group of consultants with the IFC, with SLASPA and international advisors. SLASPA was involved, right? So the solution content was in there. Now, what happened is that there were two stages. There was a request for qualifications, RFQ, where a number of people, 55 people, showed interest, both local and international. And out of that, only 3 businesses were given a RFQ, request for qualifications, because we wanted the best and we wanted the most experienced people to handle our airports. And out of that, 3 and one of these are involved in the airports in Jamaica. It's really surprising. So then we had these 3 people, and these people were given bids. When they sent back the bids, there were hundreds of questions. SLASPA was in the process of answering these questions, and a concessionary agreement, a draft concessionary agreement, had been prepared. And the government is very much aware of that. A draft concessionary agreement had been prepared. And in that agreement, what we are doing in that agreement is beginning to answer some questions, etc. There was one basic question we hadn't dealt with, which is the question of VAT. That was a burning issue, in that the concessionaire wanted to find out whether they had to pay VAT. And then you know how the VAT Act in St. Lucia is. You have to go to Parliament to do that. So that was one burning issue that we had to discuss, VAT, the payment of VAT. But all the arrangements had been done in the concessionary agreement, and to make it better, out of that, in that agreement, it laid out all the roles of the PPP, of the private sector person, and the role of SLASPA. And from there, that agreement will have to come to cabinet and then to Parliament for verification, and the financial closing, when these 3 people had shown that they had the necessary expertise and the financial capability without increasing the national debt of the country by 1 cent.
Mr. Pierre, we're going to have to take a break for the weather at this point in time, but when we come back, we'll be taking some calls. Welcome back to the Lunchroom, where we seek to inform, educate, and illuminate. And I am your host, Calix George Jr. You can call now. The number is 452-3046. That is 452-3046. If you have any questions for the Honorable Philip J. Pierre, or if you have any comments on the Hiwanora International Airport project. You can also email us at lunchroom@rcistlucia.com, and you can also follow us on 101.1 FM in the north, 99.2 in the south, and you can also check out our Facebook feed, our Facebook live feed. On Facebook, just look for Radio Caribbean International, or you can follow us on our website, rcistlucia.com. And so we are heading back. Oh, we have a call. Sorry. Good afternoon and welcome to the lunchroom. What's on your plate today?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon to you and good afternoon to Mr. Pierre. Firstly, I would like to address the fears of the leader of the opposition as to the construction of that airport, and not only the cost that we know is also going to create a serious cost effect for our country and our country's debt as we have been expressing. But I also want to bring to the attention of the country, based on Mr. Pierre's fears, the fact that the Alan Chancellor regime government recently opened a road in Duga Miku in his constituency, costing $18 million, was a direct award to Fresh Start, and that road is already under repairs. So I think that Mr. Pierre's fears are founded based on those facts, because here you have a company getting a direct award to build a road of $18 million delivered less than 1 year, and the road already needs repairs. So this is a very serious fear. It shows that this government is not doing things in the right manner. The fact that they are giving direct awards to a big contract, the biggest undertaking ever in the history of St. Lucia. We all fear this. We also have outlined the fact that all of the other countries within this region and even beyond the region, even internationally, are going the PPP way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller. It kind of fits into an email which I have just gotten, but I'll allow Mr. Pierre if you have any comments.
Yeah, you see, caller, we talk about the procurement. Now, let me tell you simply what procurement is. Procurement is how you choose the person to do the job. It's very simple. Procurement means how you choose the person to do the job. Now, let me tell you how they normally choose people to do jobs when it comes to big government jobs. There's a tender. A tender means that you advertise the job to be done, and people who qualify, supposing you advertise a job to build a house, people who can build houses qualify, then they send a tender. That tender, if it's your private house, that means you sit down with your family and decide who you're going to give the house to build. If it's a government project, it goes to a tenders board. The tenders board does not include politicians. It includes civil servants. And at the tenders board, they choose who the contractor is to give the job.
Let's take a call, Mr. Pierre. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. This is the lunchroom, and what's on your plate today?
Good afternoon, and how is everybody there?
I'm good, thank you.
Mr. Pierre, good afternoon.
Yes, sir.
And do you realize that you have, if you do win the next election, you have a serious legislative agenda coming before you? Have you noticed that?
Well, first of all, if I win elections, because I think it's because the people of St. Lucia want me to win. So I hope that the people agree.
Thank you very much for that. But let's get a bit serious here. We are now taking a loan for $100,000 US.
100 million.
No, 100 million now and 75 million to come.
Thank you. Good.
That's US dollars, eh?
I understand that. And that goes towards our books. I want to find out, can you show me one Commonwealth country that have gone to the bank, take such a loan, and then award a contract to a contractor without a bid? Have you come across any of these?
To the best of my knowledge, no. I can't be categorical, but to the best of my knowledge, no.
Thank you. That debt is the debt of the taxpayers of St. Lucia.
Particularly the young people.
Thank you. But that's good. My question to you now is, are you ready? Are you ready to take legal action against the administration of Alan Chancellor for awarding a contract of that value without a bid?
Well, I'll just even color. In all my politics, I'm not someone who makes threats. I don't threaten anybody. I don't threaten any government. I don't threaten any party. I'm not in the business of threats. Too many things in St. Lucia are based on threats and not based on facts. If the people of St. Lucia elect us into government, we're going to sit down and look at all these things. And as I said in my letter to SLASPA yesterday, we will look at what went wrong and what went right. And any action that has been taken will be taken. But I'm not in the business of coming here and threatening people and say, I'll do this, I'll do that. I haven't done it before, I will not do it. What I'm saying to you, we are going to look at all the factors and take the necessary action, if action is to be taken.
Yeah, but you're missing the point slightly. Here is an administration that goes, they get a huge loan, awards a contract without a bid. That's taxpayers that are going to pay for that in the end. Why must I wait, or any taxpayer wait, for a change of government to see if they carry out the right procedure? Why not now legally find out if they're doing the right thing and if they're entitled to award such a contract directly? That's the point I'm making here. This has to go to court. There's no way we can allow them to continue on that path. Because in the end, as Adrian Auger said, it will cost us so much money. And there's no way we could guarantee in the next 4 to 5 years we could bring in 900,000 tourists through that airport to pay only the interest.
Thank you very much, caller.
Thank
you very much. We have to take some more calls.
You see, caller, a mistake that you're making, the tax not only being paid by tourists. That's the point. That rumor has been spread that tourists pay the tax. No. It's anybody who goes through the airport who is not going to a CARICOM country. So the speculator will pay it. If you go for holiday in England, you'll pay it. For holiday in Canada or United States, you pay it. So that idea is a tax that's going to be paid by foreigners is not true.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon and welcome to the lunchroom. What's on your plate?
I want to make a contribution. Mr. Pierre. Mr. Pierre.
Yes?
I'm supporting what you're doing there right now. And that should be continuing. Like on the market step and from the market step. Because the whole of St. Lucia, the people of St. Lucia, do not agree with what's going on there now. And let's demonstrate against that airport. That's what we have to do right now. Let's demonstrate, let's rally against that airport. Because we are the ones going to pay for that. You know?
Thank you very much, caller. We're trying to get as many calls in as possible. Good afternoon and welcome to the lunchroom. What's on your plate today?
Good afternoon, Cadex. Good afternoon, Mr. Leader of the Opposition.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Look, gentlemen, I want to concentrate on one of the issues raised by the Leader of the Opposition, the debt issue. You know, as he rightly pointed out, as the Leader of the Opposition rightly pointed out, a lot of us can't seem to grasp the significance of our debt situation and what the addition of 100 to 175 million US dollars to our debt stock will mean to us as a people, especially as it concerns our continuing development as a country. You know, one of the things that this situation will affect is this, and bearing in mind that the Prime Minister has already said the country is broke. And for that reason, I think, he has cut back on this, cut back on that, cut back on all types of social programs that benefit the rank and file of solutions, especially poor people. So we need to think about, if this situation is already so dire, what type of effect another $500 million in debt will do to our education system, our healthcare system, our social programs. You know, we need to think about these things. The other thing is, we cannot afford, St. Lucia cannot afford, as a small, vulnerable economy, to have any default in terms of its debt payments. And we know, we're talking about a tourism-related project where we are depending on tourists coming into this country to repay that mammoth, that huge loan. Anything, any little thing, whether we're talking a storm or we're talking a hurricane, whether we're talking about something that happens in, say, the U.S. or in the UK, where most of our tourists come from, we know that could affect us in a major way, whether it be for 6 months, whether it be for a year, whether it be for 5 years. So what happens then in terms of the repayment of that huge loan? And how is it going to affect us in terms of us defaulting on our loan payments as a result? I mean, these are the things that we have to consider as a people in terms of the action that this government is taking with regard to the International Airport.
And
thank you very much.
And Colin, what it does also, it narrows your fiscal space. You see, look, we have to borrow to do work at St. Jude's. We have to borrow. There's work we need to do, and when you put that loan in, it narrows your fiscal space. So even though you have an airport departure tax, your fiscal space is narrowed because you've expanded your level of borrowing. And I repeat myself, if it was so simple, everybody would just put an airport development tax and build an airport.
Mr. Pierre, on the Prime Minister's page, his Facebook page, there's a post on the Hiwanara International Airport where it speaks about the cost of the project, and also mentions the project which incorporates a 30-year master plan for HIA. Have you been able to see that master plan or any kind of documentation regarding the project itself?
What I know is that the IFC had prepared a master plan for HIA. That master plan was prepared, and that master plan was incorporated in the arrangement which we had with them. That's what I know for a fact.
Okay, but so then they're not necessarily using that existing master plan?
We do not know. And I'll tell you something about airports, Curly. The important thing of airport, which I learned from interaction with the IFC, airports are not, terminals are not buildings, you know. Terminals are about flow. Terminals are about how you can get people through, and terminals are about the concessionary things that you have there, the shops, the boutiques, the restaurants. That is what this is about. So it's not about beautiful renderings of buildings. It's about functionality. It's about how you can get people in and out of there, how you can get people to come in and shop, because airports now have become hubs of social activity. If you go through Gatwick, you see most of Gatwick's, the way it flows, when you leave it, what you leave, you see all the shopping on both sides of Gatwick Airport. So you have to shop, you have to buy something. You see restaurants and not the building as such. So when we see beautiful renderings that look very nice, that's not the important thing in airports. What's important in airport terminal construction is the flow, how you can get people in, how you can get them out, and how you can get people to subscribe or to purchase shopping or to improve their shopping when they are in the airports. The buildings, the renderings don't matter. It's the flow that matters.
I have an email here that just came in. I find it difficult to believe that a contract has been signed with a contractor that had not been vetted to include performance bids, insurances, etc. Further, if there is such a document, it must be a public document accessible to all. Secondly, I would imagine that such an award would require Parliament approval. Please shed some light.
Well, the only thing that the Parliament has discussed are two things. One, the reinstatement of the airport departure tax, which was suspended by the last government, the reinstatement, and two, the $100 million loan which the government was asked to guarantee. You may recall, if you look at the IMF report, which was based on information given by the Ministry of Finance, it said that the loan for the airport would not have to be guaranteed by government. And the IMF falsely or wrongly put in the document And again, this is verifiable fact. The IMF put in the document, the exact words were that loan would not be part of the national debts. We've learned that the IMF was misled, and that debt is contingently liable to the people of St. Lucia and is part of the national debt.
But don't you think that the government may be saying that there was a rebasing done, and I think the debt came from 80%, it went down to about 66%.
73%. Yeah.
Right, and then, well, I suppose since then it has been moving upwards.
Yes, yeah.
So then they figure that maybe they have a little bit more space to go out and borrow a bit more.
They may have more space, but use that space for enterprises that benefit the people directly. Use it for St. Jude's. Use it for the Soufriere Hospital. Use it for these things. Use it for projects that will benefit the people, and keep it for housing.
You hear that the airport, Hiwanora International Airport, is a cash cow, and that the government should never.
I don't know. I have the financial statements for Hiwanora International Airport, and you know
how solvent is the.
You see, I tell you something. A lot of things we say in this country, we just say it. Now, look at the cash cow capabilities of Hiwanora International Airport, and that's not prepared by me. That's SLASPA annual report for 2014, albeit a few years be 2014, right? And if you look at the trend of increases, if you look at the tourism increases this year, etc., on the revenue page, right? And I'm reading from the financial statements. Here's what it said about SLASPA. It said that SLASPA made a profit of $2 million before finance charges. And after finance charges, SLASPA made a loss of $2 million.
That's 2014.
In 2014. Okay. And I have all those that have been published, 20 footnotes, etc.
Is that SLASPA overall, or is that
both the airports and the seaports? And if you look at the seaports, right, you will see that at Hiwanora International Airport for 2014, the revenue there was only $24 million.
Right, in total.
In total, yeah, and that's on page 37. Right? So the idea that airports are cash cows is not true. The reason why airports are not cash cows is because of the maintenance. And what gives the private sector the edge is that they experience and they manage large numbers of airports. So there's what you call economies of scale. So in the procurement, and I want to use the word correctly, in what they buy, in choosing people that they buy from, they have economies of scale, because they've been doing that all the time. So if you have to buy a conveyor belt, you say to a supplier, listen to me, I'm going to buy 4 conveyor belts so you get a better price. Just use that as an example.
But surely the government would have had to have done some sort of feasibility study to determine its ability to borrow.
Exactly. And that is what we ask in the government, to let the parliament discuss it. Why are we groping in the dark? Let the parliament, let us have a debate, go to the parliament, because figures, I mean, we've been told a lot of things. There was some calculation by a minister of billions of dollars, some calculation, which let the parliament discuss it, put it on the table, and we don't have one side says without any proof. I've just proved.
Mr. Pierre, let's take a call that's coming in. Good afternoon and welcome to the lunchroom. What's on the menu for you today?
Good afternoon and welcome to the lunchroom. What's on the menu for you today?
Well, I just picked up on what you were saying there, right? And
there's some feedback, caller. Could you please turn off your radio or whatever you're listening on?
Yeah, you hear me now better?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, well, the thing is that Richard had a show and he used to show papers with government letterheads, everything, and that still didn't change people's minds. So I think there's a hard point that Mr. Pierre is trying to prove there. I wish him luck in doing that, because I don't know what's happening there. But
is that it, caller? Well, thank you very much.
Well, you see, what I've done, caller, is I have given you the SLASPA statements. All I have done today is verifiable facts. What they must do is the counter arguments must come with verifiable fact. How was the contractor chosen?
But I think what the caller is also saying is that it seems as if the attitude is that it's a fait accompli, that the government effectively cannot be challenged regardless of whatever position.
Clearly, I'll tell you something. All governments in a democratic system, they are challenged on one day. That's election day. All governments, and that's the beauty of our system. All governments face the challenge of the people at election day. So the young people have to decide whether it is in their best interest to have a debt or $500 million when a debt could be avoided.
You wrote, I believe you said yesterday that you wrote.
I wrote to the management of SLASPA. Yeah. And I want to make
what was that about?
The letter to my SLASPA was laying out our case why we think the government should not go by the loan option and go with a PPP. And I want to add very quickly, that letter was not aimed at the personnel of SLASPA. There's nothing. In St. Lucia, we have a tendency to make everything personal. That letter was written to the manager of SLASPA, but it was of the policy and not the personal situation. So we have nothing personal against the people who work at SLASPA. Nothing.
Mr. Pierre, it's gone very quickly. Unfortunately, we're almost out. We are, in fact, out of time. So perhaps I'll just allow you to say a few parting words.
Curly, I want to thank you very much for having me. I want to thank you. What I want to say is basically three things. Number one, we are not against the redevelopment of Ivanhoe Airport. I want to say it twice. We are not against the redevelopment of Ivanhoe International Airport. Number two, we believe that the way in which the government is going forward with it is going to put unnecessary debt on the people of St. Lucia, particularly the young people of St. Lucia. Number three, we believe that is going to hinder the ability of the country to borrow for more pressing matters because it is going to reduce the fiscal space. Number four, we believe that the process in which the government is following, what the government is doing, is not transparent enough. How the government is choosing the contractor, how the government chose the contractor, how the government intends to choose the other contractors is not clear enough. And number five, we also think that the government failed in its effort to redevelop the airport when they were there in their first term, even though the airport development tax was already there. So the airport development tax is not the only measure by which you decide whether you borrow money to build airports or not. I want to thank you very much, and I want to say to the government of St. Lucia, let good sense prevail and SLASPA to relook at the path that they are taking.
Thank you very much, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, Honourable Philip J. Pierre.